heard, but they often say the toughest year of marriage on average is the seventh year. Seventh year. You've been doing this for 7 years?
Yeah.
They tired.
The 7 number really bothered me. I'm not gonna lie. Cause
really?
like, why
7?
That number is such a...
Welcome to the NOIRPOISED podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life.
So we've heard talk a lot the past couple of years about how divorce rates has risen, especially from like COVID. I think it was like a thing like during COVID, a lot of people got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, let me just do some research and kind of figure out some of the stats on that, not just about COVID, but just in general, like divorce rates right now in America. And I pulled up some information from an article, 2 articles, and I'll link it down below so you guys can see it too. Few of the things that I found was a lot of people are divorcing around the age 25 and 39. Let me just make sure that I have this right.
Gap.
Yeah. Well, point is it's like young people. In my opinion, that's what I thought of. And I don't know if you've heard, but they often say the toughest year of marriage on average is the 7th year. Seventh year. We're approaching 6 years. So you know me. I'm not waiting till you're
I thought
7.
it was the first 5 years.
Well, for different reasons, but the average is usually 7 years. That's usually when people are like, yeah, I'm done. I think the first 5 years is probably difficult, and I can see why the first year, because it's like a new transition, and usually around that time, that's when you're starting to have kids, so you're entering like new experiences with that person. But year 7, if you did do it that way, where you had kids within the first 5 years, you probably are like in that routine struggle, right? So they say year 7 is usually the most difficult for majority. And of course, this is average. This is not general across the board. But on average, year 7 is the year that most people get divorced. And even from this article, they were saying it's not just first marriages, also in second marriages, people tend to divorce around the like 7th year. Yeah. So I was like, oh, we approaching 6. I'm not going to wait for year 7 to figure it out.
I wonder what it is about
I like to do the maintenance before. Huh?
I wonder what it is about 7 years
That's what I was trying to think of. I was like, what about year 7? So I started trying to like brainstorm on where relationships usually are at year 7 of marriage, right? And it didn't say year 7 of relationships in general, because some people date for 10 years and then they get married. Right. So that's like year 17 of their relationship. Something about year 7 of marriage is the average of when people tend to file for divorce. So again, I was thinking about this. I was like, okay, year 7, let me try to like, most people tend to, if they're getting married young, year 7, maybe they have toddlers. They have like kids in like the lower years of elementary school. There's a lot of chaos. If you have multiple kids, now you have multiple toddlers. That could be a factor. It could be a situation where there's not enough help. That's something that we're realizing now, where we're like, we kind of need the support. So maybe there's a lack of support. Then I start thinking of finances. It may be a season of financial changes or struggle. Maybe someone loses a job. Maybe the economy is different from when they did get married and you add on children. Because realistically, that's what's happening right now. The living costs are increasing, but the jobs are not paying more, right? Like that's the reality of most people who are in similar situations. So I'm like, maybe it's like just a combination of all these things. But in those things, I think what tends to happen is, one, we're always changing in some way, shape, or form. So when you're so busy in like the day-to-day things that you're doing, especially with children and work and stuff like that, maybe there's not enough time designated into learning your spouse. I thought of that. And then I was like, maybe it's a situation where like there's no time to invest as much as you did in the beginning of the relationship or marriage. And then there's also, we change. Because I say like every 5 years, you'll notice like someone's like different from what you knew. So 5 years, let's say one of the spouses realizes something significant and starts to move different, and this is not the person you're used to. And maybe they don't know how to navigate through those changes. And so it kind of creates a distance with them.
You sent this video the other day that I thought was really interesting. In the video, he was talking about couples who don't share the same vision. And he said that causes them to grow apart because
Right.
if you have two
division.
different visions, that's dual vision or division.
Yes.
So I think part of that could be that it's not that they don't love each other or care for each other, but you start to have different visions and you don't realize when you're growing apart.
Yeah, like when it's happening.
Right.
But I figured this would be a good conversation to bring to some of the people who listen to us, because I know some of them are married, and, you know, a lot of the people we surround ourselves with have been married around this type of mark, around like the 5 to like 9 year mark. So just a couple of stats before we get deep into the conversation. So the median duration of first marriages end around 7.8 to 7.9 years. The second marriages ends around 7.3. Well, 6.8 to 7.3 marriages. So it's interesting that second marriages actually end sooner than first marriages. I wonder if it's because like they know the signs and they're just like, I already see where this is happening. What's happening here? One of the things the article touched on is the different rates in marriages based on profession. So I think that touches on one, finances, right? Which we try to act like that's not important sometimes, but it's important. And two, I think it also touches on time, because there are some roles that require more of your time outside of the home, and you don't have the time to invest in your family and your relationship. And I'm not going to go through like all the specific titles, but I just wanted to let y'all know that there were differences based on profession. And another thing they touched on is the differences between race, which we kind of discussed in a previous episode. So if you haven't heard it, definitely go see it. So yeah, those were some of the stats. Yeah. And there was I forgot to mention, there was a difference between men and women.
How so?
They said that women tend to file earlier than men. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
I wonder why that is.
I'm sure there's many reasons.
The number, the 7 number really bothered me. I'm not going to lie. Because
really?
like, why that number is such a prominent number. So I looked at
it's a range though, because like a lot of them like 7.3, 7.8.
Right.
So,
but it's still around the 7-year mark.
Yeah.
So I looked it up really quickly, and one of the things that came up is that the number 7, spiritually in many religions, signifies completion or renewal.
Ooh.
So it could just be that when that 7-year mark comes, kind of like, do you want to renew this contract? And you're thinking, no, something maybe metaphysically is happening. We've talked about this before, but there's a psychiatrist who said that every 7 years, we go through major shifts in identity, relationships, and personal goals.
Yeah. I think I remember this.
So
life quakes.
Yeah, life quakes. Yeah. So yeah, I think all that coincides with if you're at a space where you have dual vision and that 7-year mark comes, maybe something that happens metaphysically that just says, yeah, maybe I'm not really ready to renew this contract. And that's just talking about divorce rates. That's not even talking about the people who you're married, but you're technically separated. You're living in the same home.
That's people who are actually bold enough to go through with divorce. Yeah.
One of the things that we notice is that the divorce rates are lower within millennial marriages.
Yes.
So once again, millennials, you're just breaking
cycles.
I know, breaking cycles. But I think that is due to the fact that millennials are getting married later in life.
It actually talked about that.
Compared to Gen X and boomers in the generation before.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I read in the article is with the age gap, the age range of people who get divorced, it tends to be around like the 25 to 39 age range, right? So you're kind of like entering real adulthood, if so to say. But it did mention that millennials are divorcing less. The divorce rate is actually higher within the baby boomers. Which is interesting, but I think it's because they also got married really super young.
Yeah.
I know it's a time where a lot of people are like thinking about being in a relationship if they're not, or if they are in a relationship, it's like the love month. I think there's always some form of like negativity connected with people who are still single in their late 20s and 30s, and they haven't found someone, and it's always like, what's going on kind of thing. Yeah. But this, I think, proves that there is nothing wrong with waiting on the right timing, because getting married to the wrong person, bro, there is nothing worse. You don't want to do that. You don't want to get married to the wrong person. So I think it's actually better in our generation that a lot of people are waiting to like build themselves, find themselves, learn about themselves, because the reality is you're always going to be figuring who you are. We're always going to be figuring out who we are. And having to teach someone or guide someone to do so on, about us, if you don't have the information, how are you then going to provide it to that person?
Right.
Nonetheless, they do their own work to kind of keep, dating you and learning you. But I think it's important that we're aware of who we are and where we are so we can communicate that to our significant other. I personally think that year 7, that's probably what may be happening along with other things. But I think one of the factors is, like you said, life quakes are starting to happen and it's shifting your perspective. It's shifting how you move. Maybe the things that were important to you in the beginning of your relationship, you're realizing, it's not that anymore. Yeah. Or maybe it's like, I found a new passion and maybe it doesn't sit well with the other person. Yeah. Maybe the time is being distributed differently. But the point is, things are changing and evolving.
Right.
And if you're not in a mature space mentally, emotionally in your life to be able to be aware of that for yourself and realize that so you can communicate it to your spouse, what ends up happening is friction. Yeah. You get what I mean? And I think that's where the division comes in, because it's like, all right, this is what they do now, so whatever, I'm going to let you do that. And you fall into that cycle and routine, you know?
I don't remember the exact stat, but I remember seeing something about most people who get divorced simply because they grow apart. It's not that one is being unfaithful or they're in an abusive relationship. It's literally just, we're not feeling each other.
Differences.
Anymore. I don't remember who taught me this as a kid, but I remember growing up and thinking that I will not get married before 25. And that's because I heard that you reach a different level of maturity after the age of 25.
Brain formation,
right. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the data shows that people who get married between the ages of 18 and 24 are more likely to get a divorce, because you don't really know yourself. You don't even really know the world.
And it's difficult to find yourself while trying to find another person.
Right. So there's two people who are trying to figure things out and navigating. And it's kind of like you're trying to pull me in this direction and I'm trying to pull you in that direction. So I say this to any single person I know or who the topic comes up is just take the time to know yourself.
Yeah.
Because once you know yourself, then you can fully navigate a relationship. And it's not going to be easy either way, but it's going to be a lot better than you just trying to figuring yourself out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
One of the things that I believe that leads to divorce is having unrealistic or unfair expectations of the other.
I could see
and doesn't necessarily mean that I want you to do this for me, but it could also mean I want you to react a certain way. Like if I all of a sudden want to become a musician and I'm going out every night and playing in the band, I'm expecting you to support me. And if you're saying something like, this is new to me, I have my own things to do, that alone can create some division. But it's unfair of me to put that expectation on you. And I realize that a lot of people, everyone does this, I think. We have unrealistic expectation of others, and when they disappoint us, we kind of put that on them. We don't try to shift our own mindsets. We don't take accountability. Yeah, we don't take accountability or say, this is the way the person is. I know they love me. I know they care for me. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. One of the things that I do, not just in our relationship, but in any relationship that I have, is just remind myself that the person loves me. So even if I feel disappointed, I'm not necessarily putting it on them like you did something bad, but it's more so I had an expectation of them that they didn't meet, and that's not on them. That's just on me. They still love me and they still care for me, and I shouldn't judge them or move a certain way because of that. But I think a lot of times in relationships, it becomes, you're not there for me, you don't support me, and I'm going to hold that against you. And it starts to slowly become a tit for tat. Like, you ever seen the show Divorce Court growing up? I don't know if they still have it.
I didn't really watch it like that, no.
But it was around
I know what you're talking about.
The court show days. And one thing I remember specifically is a lot of the back and forth were about petty little things. Like, I told him to wash the car and he didn't wash the car and I had guests over kind of thing. And when you remove all the pettiness, you kind of see that, oh wait, we both had unrealistic or unfair expectations.
Yeah, not only that though, because one thing I've learned about let me circle back. Two things. First, I've learned the importance of knowing how to argue. We talk a lot about communication and understanding, and people say like that's kind of like the foundation of keeping a relationship. It's not always the case, because I could communicate something to you and you understand it, but nothing happens afterwards, right? So it's about knowing how to argue effectively. And I think that's really important, because oftentimes with disagreements and division, it is the petty stuff. It's not like someone did like one big insane thing. It's always a bunch of little things that build up.
Right.
A bunch of little things that the person, and this is across the board, not even in just marriages, when someone does like 10 minor things, they're all small things, but it's like a buildup of things that's constantly triggering you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, I love that you said taking accountability, because oftentimes the other person doesn't know they're triggering something within you, right? Unless you communicate that. But it's knowing how to get your point across in an effective manner and arguing in a mature way, because the arguments tend to be like, well, I did this, da 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 da, and I said that, and you did this. And it's usually like just a bunch of tit for tat.
Yeah.
Versus let's have a healthy debate where we come to a resolution, versus we're talking about all the problems and the conversation stops at the problems.
Right.
Right. And that's across the board. We do that as people, because even when you look up into information like this, they list a bunch of problems, but nobody says, well, how can we resolve this? Yeah. We never talk about solutions. I'm starting to like be more invested in the solutions. Like, let's talk about the problems, find out the foundation, and then how can we solve it?
Right.
One of the things I also noticed was that women tend to be the one to divorce on average more likely. It's at 66%. So 66% of the time in divorces, it's usually women who are doing so. And I know we talked a lot about men and women, and y'all probably tired of hearing it. I'm sorry.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Yeah. But what I'm learning this year, and that's why it keeps on coming up, is that there really are foundational differences within us based on how we were raised.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about how childhood affects us. Society raises boys and girls differently. And so the foundational issues and the things that trigger us are sometimes different, right? So when I saw that number, I was like, I'm low-key not surprised. Because, women were more emotional, they say, right? And men are more stoic and more likely to hold things in and not express it. So I think within a marriage, that can be conflicting.
Yeah.
If you have one, and it could be vice versa, because I've met people where the man wants to have conversation and the woman's like, whatever.
Right.
But the point is, those differences causes conflict. So if you have one person who's like, I'm not willing to talk about what I'm feeling, and the other person who's trying to pull teeth, you've been doing this for 7 years?
Yeah.
They tired. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in those people's shoes. I'd be tired. Like, at the end of the day, you want to see some form of progression. I agree with the unrealistic expectations, but I think within a relationship, there's a form of responsibility on both parties where your spouse has an expectation of you, even if you don't fulfill that expectation. But I think it is your job to kind of try to progress and provide what it is that person is requesting of you, right? Because relationships is a service type of situation. And we're often thinking about self all the time, that we forget that. We forget that, like, I vowed to be in this relationship to serve you.
Right.
And you vowed to be in this relationship to serve me. Whatever that looks like, our job is to service one another in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean you neglect yourself and you negate all the things that you want to pursue. But if you're in a relationship with someone who's on the same page as you when it comes to that, if you have a new passion that you're working on, even if it may affect my personal passions, but there's a way to balance that out.
Right.
You feel me?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's like just not recognizing the differences and working on how can we merge these differences.
As you're speaking, it makes me think of something I learned recently about how the brain is wired. The brain is wired for reward. So whatever you get that's rewarding or feels good, you're more likely to repeat it. And it makes sense where if two people are arguing, it feels good to bring up certain situations to kind of prove your point and say, this is why I'm right and this is why I'm wrong. But I learned that the way the brain works and the way life works, if you get an immediate reward, you're more likely to be unhappy in the future. But if you're...
Wait, what?
If you... Whatever satisfies you instantly is more likely to lead to something negative in the near future.
Interesting.
Yeah,
why?
Because you're working on impulse. That's one of the reasons why. And I can give you an example is, you ever said something in the heat of anger and then you later regret it? In the moment, it was instantly satisfying or gratifying because you got it off your chest and you said it. But because it happened impulsively, later on you regret it.
But what if it's like a good thing? Like not... how do I say it? What if it's like something good that you're saying or doing that you're rewarded for? Is it the same?
Well, that's the point. The way this habit works or this trick works is you're supposed to build up to until you get to that point. So if we're having an argument about something and instantly I want to say something that'll prove my point, but I say, you know what? I'm not going to say that. I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to say something that, bruises may not allow my ego to vocalize how I really feel, but it's going to be beneficial in the near future. So if I believe I have points of why I did X, Y, and Z, but I say, you know what, let me humble myself and say, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry, it bruises my ego. I feel like I didn't get one in or whatever, but later in the near future, it's going to be beneficial because you're going to recognize that, oh, he wasn't being petty. He wasn't, trying to get one in. He literally apologized. I was expecting an argument, but he owned up to it. I may be feeling like, man, I could have said X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to humble myself. But
I see what you're
in the near future, it benefits you. And when you do that enough, your brain works off of habit. When you do that enough, it'll naturally start to get to that point. And it won't be my ego's bruised anymore. It's going to feel like normal because I'm doing this now and I'm going to get a reward, which is in turn a reward itself.
I'm thinking about what you just said. That's interesting. Yeah. I've never...
Atomic Habits, the audiobook I'm listening to. Yeah, it's from a book, Atomic Habits. I would definitely recommend it. It literally helps you rewire your brain to do the things that you don't want to do. And just set certain rules and boundaries. And I've been using it, honestly, in all aspects of my life. And
send it to me and then I'll put the link down below too.
In work, in relationships, like there's certain things like, let's say I walk by the dishes and I don't feel like doing dishes now, but I'm like, I know if I don't do them, you're going to end up doing them at the end of the night and you're tired. So let me just do it now. And then later on, after a while, it just becomes, oh, I see dishes. I'm just going to do it quickly. And it's no longer, oh man, I don't want to do it now, or I'm trying to procrastinate it. And I think that could definitely apply to relationships where if you're doing the work now, regardless of how negative it makes you feel, you'll reap the rewards in the long run. And when that 7-year metaphysically does come up, or metaphorically does come up, you're more likely to want to renew that contract because you know that I've been doing things and I've been getting rewarded for it. So why wouldn't I want to continue?
I like that. That's good to know. I'm going to look up on that. Thank you.
No problem.
As you were talking, I was like, let me give some of the reasons and percentages. So lack of commitment was at 73%. Argue too much at 56%, second in line. So it shows the importance of arguing effectively, knowing how to argue. I think that's very important. Everybody should look that up. Learn how to argue. Because once you learn how to argue, it's no longer an argument. It's a healthy debate, in my opinion. Infidelity at 55%. I don't blame y'all. Married too young at 46%. Unrealistic expectations, you mentioned that, at 45%. Lack of equality in the relationship, 44%. I always use this phrase, give and take. I think that's like one of the foundational things that a marriage should be is give and take. Because while you're servicing one another, if one person is servicing and the other's not, it can become draining and burdensome. And then the last two is lack of preparation for marriage at 41%. So the importance of finding yourself. Shout out to the millennials, the ones that are still single. Listen, don't rush the process, okay? Not. Keep doing what you're doing. It will come in due time. And the last one is domestic violence and abuse. Yeah, get out of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are some of the percentages. So solutions. Because we talked about like what's causing it, but solutions on how to avoid this, right? One thing I've heard several people say that they do is they have business meetings within their relationship. And I think that's really important and it could be effective because when you go to work, you have meetings on a either daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, depending on where you stand with your team. So everyone's on the same page and everyone's aligned and they know what's happening, what's the vision, what has changed, what hasn't changed, what goals have we met, what goals haven't we met. So that way everyone's on the same page. I think unfortunately within a marriage, that often gets thrown away throughout the process of like being tired. Okay. In a nutshell, everybody tired. So being tired and just trying to get through the day and doing things day at a time, that we often stop prioritizing our significant other throughout the process and we hear people say this all the time, but when you bring children into the picture, you know the children cannot fend for themselves. They need you. literally need you. Whereas you look at your spouse and you're like, all right, he can make himself this, or she could do that on her own. And we start to put each other in the back rather than making each other a priority. Yeah. I think that happens a lot with marriages. People make children the priority, which is totally understandable, but it's not healthy. Yeah. And that's one thing I told myself before marriage, when married, before children, and even now I try to remind myself that, like, yeah, she's going to grow up and she's going to find her own people and she's going to have her own significant other and her own family, and I'm going to be stuck with you. Mm-hmm. So we have to always keep finding ways to make each other a priority. Right. But it's easy to say that, but it's very difficult to keep doing when you're actually in like the nitty gritty of the day-to-day actions and finding time to just be there for one another. Yeah. So I can see how people can not only lose sight of who their spouse are, because you lose sight of who you are too. Right. That's a reality for a lot of people. You lose sight of who you are in the process of trying to raise children or be there for other people and reach these goals and do this and do that. So I think, honestly, if I had to give one advice, and I'm giving it to myself, because I don't want y'all to think we're being judgmental. No. Listen.
we be rewatching these.
Listen, literally. We're like, oh, that's a good point. But I think really spending time with the person, not just spending time like we're sitting in front of the TV and watching TV. And teachers don't, because for some people that may work, you know, like for every relationship it's different, but finding out what is necessary for your particular relationship. Yeah. And I think having those meetings on at least a weekly basis, in my opinion, the same way your manager may want to meet with you every week, or the VP of the department want to meet with like the leaders every month or every quarter. Yeah. That should be done in a family dynamic. Yeah. Family functions the same way. It's a business, okay? And a marriage is a partnership. Yeah, companionship is nice. I was watching this video about the difference between companionship and partnership. And we often operate in a way that's only effective when you're each other's companion. But we don't operate effectively as partners. And as partners, there should be constant meetings on what's been happening on your end. This is what's been happening on my end. Yeah. How can we align these two things and make sure that it's going to be effective for the final goal of our family and the dynamic and what we're trying to build as one? Because if you are doing your own things and I'm not aware, and I'm doing my own things and you're not aware, now it creates friction and confusion. Yeah. And I don't know about y'all, but for me, confusion... If you got me confused, I'm going to look at you funny. So I think effective communication in that way, not just effective communication like, I don't like what you did yesterday. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times we hear effective communication, we're just like, yeah, express my feelings, my, what I'm going through, what this, that, and the third. No, but it's more so effective communication on where are we now? Where are we headed? Yeah. Where were we before? What can we learn? How can we grow? Like doing those things. Like for me, I think that's more important than going on the dates weekly. You know what I mean? But the dates weekly are necessary too. But you can also combine them where like that's your time to spend together and just like enjoy each other on a pleasurable aspect, but also remember that like this is a partnership. Yeah. And if we're not putting in the work the same way that the senior VPs and the managers are putting in the work to make a company run, guess what? We're going to end up bankrupt. Literally. Like, literally, but
morally or relationship-wise.
Yeah, like you're going to end up bankrupt. You're going to be burdened. You're going to feel burnt out. And a lot of people, once you feel burnt out, you lose interest in trying anymore. Yeah. So rather than waiting for the moment of like, I'm so tired and over things, relationship maintenance, y'all. Yeah. We talked about that in season 1, I think, right? Relationship maintenance. Oh, I'm going to tag that up. Oops. I'm going to tag that episode.
And one thing I would add is don't always look to your spouse to replenish you. I think that's one of the mistakes as well. Like your spouse could and should replenish you, but you should also have some outside alternative, whether that's sports, working out, cooking, reading, whatever hobbies that you have.
Internal sources too.
But prayer or
but like internal in the sense like, sorry, I cut you off.
Say what you're going to say before I finish.
Internal sources in the sense of like, doing the work to keep learning yourself, because it shouldn't take your partner telling you like, yeah, bro, you've been acting like this and doing this, but doing the work to realize it yourself first.
Right.
I think that's the internal sources, like doing those things before you go out trying to do things that are like pleasurable. It all works together nonetheless, but internal is important too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And to finish my thought, it would just be, don't always look to your spouse to replenish you. Have some other internal or outside sources where you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm feeling kind of down and out. It looks like my husband or my wife is also feeling that way. Let me try to pick up a book and read, or let me watch a video or TV, movie. Let me go out, take a walk, so that when you do go to your spouse, it's not an empty person trying to replenish an empty person, but maybe you can even go out and get some gas to come give your spouse after you got replenished. So again, it just goes back to the expectations. Don't always put everything on your spouse, but start to do your own work to kind of bring that to the relationship. Because there was one time you said this, and I think it was on an episode before, where you said, sometimes I just need you to be good. Because if I'm good, then you'll find the strength to be good as well. And I never forgot that, because I think that speaks volume. Sometimes when you take care of yourself, you inadvertently give the other person strength as well.
Yeah. And I remember also saying in a previous episode the importance of like continue dating yourself. And I that's what I'm getting from from what you're saying right now, is like the same effort you try to put into your family and your spouse and everything else. I think it's important to find time to do it for yourself. And I think that's one thing I could see losing sight as years progress, because even now, like with a toddler and stuff, I find that like I don't do that anymore. So I think that sometimes is important, is spending that time with yourself. I guess that ultimately allows you to do the internal work when you're spending time with yourself. And another thing, faith, honestly, like to each his own what you believe in. But I think faith is very important in being on the same page when it comes to like your belief system and how your family operates. I think is very important, because when there's a division within that alone, that's going to create a division with so many other things, because it kind of sets your frame of mind, it sets your spirit, it sets the foundational things and morals, values. It starts to just shift a lot of other things. So if you're not on the same page with that, I think that's also a factor. I think it's important to find time to have discussions that are faith-based and spend time in prayer together and do the things that kind of like build both of you in whatever it is that you believe in. Yeah. So I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And we're out. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at NOIRPOISED Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.